All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here this morning. I'm sorry if we got a little untimely start, but we're started no matter what. Ms. Robbie, if you could take the roll, please.
Representative Carter, Clemens, Curcio, Garrett, Ogles, Parkinson, Ramsey, Chairman Farmer.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you for that. Members, any personal orders? Anyone you want to recognize or talk about? Perhaps good before committee starts? Seeing none, we have a calendar. So I'm going to go down through here. There's several bills that have been rolled. One looks like it's been taken off notice, so I'm just going to work from the top to the bottom here. We only had 15 bills calendared to begin with. Looks like we're going to have about half that. So today, item 1, House Bill 187 by Chairman Kiesling. That's been rolled for a week. Any objection? Seeing none. House Bill 187 rolled for a week. Item 2, that's House Bill 1200 by Chairman Hawk. Spoke with him earlier. He has an untimely filed amendment that makes the bill. That's a material change. So per our policies and procedure, that'll need to be rolled to next week. Spoke with him, and he's asked for that to be rolled. Any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 1200 rolled for a week. That brings us to item number 4, House Bill 1369 by Representative Lynn. That's been asked to be taken off notice. Any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 1369 off notice. That brings us down to item 8 by Representative Warner. That's House Bill 446. Sponsors asked for that be rolled for a week. Members, any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 446 will be rolled for 1 week. Brings us down to item 9, House Joint Resolution 97 by Representative Sparks. He's asked for that to be rolled for a week. Members, any objection? Seeing none, House Joint Resolution 97 rolled a week. Brings us to item 11, House Bill 618 by Chair Lady Rudder. That's been requested to be rolled for a week. Members, any objection to that? Seeing none, House Bill 618 rolled for a week. Brings us down to item 12, House Bill 1269 by Chair Lady Rudder. That's been requested to be rolled for a week. Members, any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 1269 rolled for a week. That brings us to item 14, House Bill 1254 by Chairman Sexton. That's been requested to be rolled for a week. Any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 1254 rolled for 1 week. And that brings us to our first bill. I have item 3. That's House Bill 798. And yes, Representative Parson, you're recognizing. I think he wanted to roll that for 1 week.
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I apologize, everyone. Also, item 3, House Bill 798 by Representative Chisholm. That's been requested to be rolled for 1 week. Any objection? Seeing none. So that House Bill 798 will be on next week's calendar. So, with that said, that brings us down to item 5 with Chairman Doggett. You've got a motion and a second. Chairman, looks like you have 2 amendments that's been filed. Would you like to move forward with one or both? Drafting Code 4182, and then there's another one, Drafting Code 4577.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Drafting Code 4577 is the one that we wish to proceed with today.
Okay. Members, you want to go ahead and give him a motion in a second, and we can go ahead and explain that.
All right, thank you. Members, this what this amendment does, and it does write the bill, creates a Second Amendment Privacy and Protection Act. What we're doing is simply looking to prohibit state and local entities and governments from compiling lists of persons who may own firearms, firearms accessories, ammunition, and so forth, and in doing so prevents them from maintaining this list and also transmitting this list on to the federal government. Now, our intent with this was not to prohibit state and local agencies such as law enforcement from collecting and keeping a list for inventory purposes that they would have as far as evidence. The evidence custodian for each department will have a list. If a firearm was taken from an individual or was confiscated lawfully, there'd be a list. There'd be a record of that. We're not going after those records. We're just making sure that we in our state do not maintain lists just for the sole fact of saying who does and who does not own or maintain a firearm, firearm accessories.
Okay. Does that amendment make the bill?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. Members who have any questions on that amendment? Representative Clemens, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know of any public entity that is currently doing that in Tennessee?
Chairman Doggett?
Thank you for the question. Not to my recollection, no, sir. This is more of a preemptive piece of legislation that to make sure that that is something that does not happen in the future.
Representative Clemens, any follow-up?
And the amendment that makes the bill excludes law enforcement and any safety agencies who may require such information to which you referred?
Chairman Doggett?
Thank you. That is a good question. That was our intent when we crafted this legislation. I have been working with the Department of Safety for the last 3 weeks. I've rolled this bill a couple times to try to help to get to that language. We do have language that, from my understanding with the Department of Safety, that kind of cleans up what we were looking to do. We did have that drafted. It would have been untimely for us to have filed that for this committee hearing today. I do have a copy of that with me, but that is not what we're on. We're on this, which was my original language. And so there are some questions from the Department of Safety as far as their concerns are about the inventory and evidence, custodians wanting to make sure that they don't. I know that if you purchase a firearm from a local gun shop or gun store, they're going to have a record of that list. Also, your FFL dealers, they have to maintain a list of every firearm that they have and have to include in that their own personal firearms or firearms that they have in their possession. So if you took a firearm into a gun shop to have it worked on, they would have to list that as a part of their records. They would have to have a record of that. We're not wanting to target those individuals. This is simply, it was just maybe a little bit of verbal verbiage that we use. Maybe it could be cleaned up, and we've been working with the Department of Safety on that.
Representative Clemens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is the amendment that addresses the concerns of the Department of Safety is not in this amendment.
Chairman Doggett?
That is correct. Now, I
Okay.
have been back and forth with the Department of Safety over this issue. Thought the language was pretty clear, but they had just a few concerns with it that a word here or there might have changed their feelings on it. So, but to your statement, you're correct. Yes, sir.
Representative Clemens?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the chain of custody in these criminal trials is so important, and that documentation is so necessary. And obviously, we all want to do everything we can to enhance public safety and protect everyone. That lack of language in this version concerns me. But I to the chairman's discretion, I wonder if we're going to hear from the Department of Safety about this legislation as drafted and before us today.
Yeah, Ms. Stroker is on the list. I was going to let everyone ask any questions they had for the sponsor and then
Thank you.
request to go out of session. So, members, any additional questions for Chairman Doggett? Okay, let's go ahead and vote to adopt this amendment. We don't mind to get this thing just on the bill as amended, and then we'll go out of session without objection, and we'll hear from Ms. Stroker. Does that sound good? So I'll get a motion in a second. Motion. All right, all those in favor of adopting House Amendment 4577 to House Bill 902, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're on House Bill 902 as amended. And members, without objection, we'll go out of session and hear from Ms. Stroker. She's requested to speak, so without objection, out of session. And ma'am, if you'll just step up there and be sure your red light's on and just introduce yourselves to the committee. And
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for the Department of Safety. Yes, Representative Clemens, to your point, this does not include the language that we needed for purposes of things that we have for seizures or things that may be included in crash reports or criminal investigations or just in our normal inventory that we have to keep for law enforcement. But Chairman Doggett has been great to work with. We've kind of been going back and forth for a few weeks now, and he has promised that he'd put the language in that we needed to address any of the information that we need to keep just for our record-keeping purposes. And so we're at the will of the committee. We're okay with working with him to get a better amendment before the full committee, if that's what y'all wish to do. He's promised that he will keep working with us to get that language right, so.
Members, any questions or comments for Ms. Stroker? Chairman Curcio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I mean, can you just describe to us a little bit about what would help tighten this up?
Yes, sir. And so there are some exceptions in there to where state agencies could keep records of firearms for criminal investigative purposes, but we keep records for any seizure that we have that's not going to be pursuant to a criminal investigation, or if there's a crash report that there was a firearm in the vehicle, we have to track that information. If we receive it from an accident scene, if we've got to hold it temporarily in evidence, and then for any inventory that we have within the department, none of that would be covered under the current exceptions because it specifically says it would have to be related to a criminal investigation, and so it wouldn't cover any of those just normal operation of business that we have to keep a record just for liability and safekeeping.
Chairman Curcio, any follow-up?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your comments.
Does anyone have any additional questions or comments for Ms. Stroker? I do. And let me just, if I'm hearing this correctly, what I'm hearing is this, is that, or is it fair to say that there is an amendment there that would maybe fix or help with all the concerns that Department of Safety has?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir. We had that language and had it drafted, and we've been working with Chairman Doggett's office. And if that language is put into it, it will alleviate all of our concerns.
Okay. All right. Members, any additional questions? All right. Thank you so much. We're going to go back in session. And with that said, I think that, where we are, we have our last calendar next week, just procedurally. This is Chairman Doggett's third. This bill's been counted 3 times, so it goes on that special calendar, which kind of leaves it hanging out there and nowhere. Just heard from Department of Safety said that there is an amendment that will fix every one of their concerns. So I would suggest one, avenue that the committee could take is that we could move this out with the sponsor's assurances that if he puts anything on this bill, it will be that amendment only in full. And if it changes in any other form or fashion in full, would you agree just to park it there?
Yes, sir. If there's any changes other than what Ms. Stroker spoke about, I would withdraw it from the full committee.
And has that amendment been drafted now?
Yes, sir, I have it, and I can give you the drafting code, 6075.
Okay. So if there's any other changes outside of Amendment Drafting Code 6075, would you agree to leave that bill in Civil Justice full committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Members? Representative Clemens, you recognized?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my only issue with that is if there's even more amendments that could be made to improve the bill that go beyond the Department of Safety's concerns, perhaps to address the judicial system's record keeping and anything like that for their purposes. If Department of Safety has their concerns with regards to Highway Patrol, TBI, things like that on behalf of the state, I mean, there could also be issues with the judicial system and otherwise, so I'd hate to limit the sponsor or us from a further improvement of the bill, I think, to achieve the spirit of his legislation. Thank you.
I'm at the will of the committee. I just made a suggestion. I'm not twisting arms or asking people to move forward. We act as a committee, as a whole. So, members, any suggestions, comments? I take any comments or suggestions from the sponsor on how you'd like to move forward or not. Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that I don't know where I am on the bill yet. Don't have super heartburn about the bill, but I think we're binding the sponsor of the bill, and binding the committee if we, bind him to only that amendment moving forward. You know, there may be some other things that may be thought of between now and next week that he may want to add on to it. There may be some things that's thought of between now and next week that we may want to add to it. And so, I mean, I don't have an issue with moving the bill forward, but, you know, I don't want to, honestly don't want to bind the sponsor, because there may be some things that we hadn't thought of, as my colleague said, and maybe some things that he hadn't thought of also. So, you know, I'll go with the will of the committee as to whether or not we move it forward. But just, you know, I think the word from the sponsor, if you know, we want to get the bill right. This reminds me of the days when I first got here where, you know, the whole committee works with a sponsor to make the bill the best bill that it can possibly be. And I think we should get back to that. I honestly think we should get back to that. And but I just wanted to, I didn't want to tie anyone's hands in this process, you know, as we decide what we're going to do moving forward. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
And thank you for that. Chairman Doggett?
Thank you. I'm at the will of the committee on this. Obviously, you know, I've come here calendared third time and have an amendment that I would prefer to be on this bill. I'm not asking for any kind of favor or anything in this nature. I understand the way this works. There is an amendment that I just referenced that the Department of Safety and I spoke about that we are willing to use as we move forward. I have no intention of making any changes to that amendment. If the committee in the full wanted to make changes to that amendment, that would be their prerogative. I would not have any need moving forward to do any of that. So.
Okay, and I found out something that I didn't know. So if we roll this again, it goes to the special calendar, and that special calendar is going to be published with the final calendar. So I don't think that if you do roll this and it goes to that special calendar, that just means basically you could be either heard next week or potentially the week after that. Sounds like to me, or maybe with that final calendar. Our final calendar is next week. So we're working on it. I don't think this would preclude you from putting this bill on notice on that calendar. Well, it's just going to go to that special calendar, correct? So it sounds like folks are wanting to work with you. It sounds like you've got an amendment, and instead of moving this thing forward and tying your hands to where you may want to broaden that or tighten it up a little bit, maybe that's what you do, Mr. Chairman.
If there's a motion to do that,
Representative Garrett?
With, of course, Chairman Doggett's permission, so to speak, I'll make a motion to refer this to the final or special calendar so the chairman can be allowed to have the time to make that amendment where it will be timely. We can consider it in sub, and then we can move it on at that point.
Yeah, and as I understand it, this will automatically go to that special calendar that is to be calendared with the final calendar. So you won't have to be worried about putting it back on notice or doing anything like that. So, can I have a motion? Do I have a second? Second. Very good. All those in favor to moving Chairman Doggett's House Bill 902 to the special calendar, say aye. 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 Opposed, say no. Ayes have it.
thank you very much.
Appreciate your work. All right, brings us to item 6, House Bill 697 by Representative Russell. You got a motion and a second. Looks like you also have an amendment, 5990, on that. Is that something you want to move forward with?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, and you've got a motion and a second on that. Does that amendment make the bill?
It does.
Very good. Sir, if you want to go ahead and explain that, and we can consider that and move forward.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. House Bill 697, as amended, would draw certain 501c4s into the Government Tort Liability Act if they provide functions and services traditionally provided by municipalities. 501c4s would need to meet the following criteria to be eligible under this bill: maintain more than 100 miles of roadway, own and operate a water and sewer distribution service, appropriate funds to support a nonprofit volunteer fire department or appropriate funds to support a police department, manage trash pickup services, and fund, operate, and maintain at least one park, recreational facility, walking trail, and dog park. There are only 2 entities in the state that would fit this definition: Fairfield Glades in Speaker Sexton's district and Tilica Village in my district. Both of these entities consist of thousands of acres, close to 10,000 residents each, which will make them larger than some cities across our state. This bill would give entities and the protections of the Governmental Tort Liability Act including tort liability caps and immunity from suits, except as outlined by state law.
Very good. Members, you've heard the explanation of the amendment, which makes the bill. Do we have any questions for Representative Russell on the amendment, which makes the bill? Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, have we put the amendment on the bill?
We have not. I mean, I'm happy to do that. If somebody wants to make a motion in a second, we can get this in proper form, and then we can ask as many questions as we'd like, or we can ask it on the amendment, because it does make the bill.
Yeah, I would rather do that if we could.
Very good,
Before
sir.
I comment.
Am
Thank
I
you.
hearing a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Very good. We're voting to adopt House Amendment 5990 for Representative Russell's House Bill 697. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. So any questions? Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Russell, for bringing this legislation. I think I've talked with you about some of the heartburn that I have with the bill, and wanted to make a suggestion that might relieve that heartburn a little bit. And my concern is this. My concern is that we're providing government protection to an entity that's not a government. This is a 501c4 entity, and then, of course, my concern is always, well, what's next on who else is going to want protection under the Government Tort Liability Act when they're not a government. Now, you've narrowed this to where I understand this particular facility or this particular area of your district provides a lot of services that the government entities would otherwise provide, even though there's not a municipality that provides these services. So I'm wondering if you would consider a suggestion. I've been trying to figure out what could trigger this type of protection, if there's an agreement with the county or with the municipality there that is part of this area of your district, or if someone after this legislation is passed has to come to the legislation. In other words, not the ones that you're talking about. They're already doing this, right? But if somebody else wants to invoke this particular statute because they're doing something similar, is it possible to amend this to where they have to come here and get that permission before this statute would apply to them? Is that something that you might consider?
Representative Russell?
Thank you, and I would be glad to sit down and chat with you about that. You know, whenever this was brought to me, I had some of the same concerns that you did, and apparently there's already 3 times in the code that we've allowed this to happen, so this would be just 2 others in addition to those 3.
Okay.
Representative Garrett?
Well, then it's up to you. I would say it's up to you what you want to do with the bill. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to present it yet, but I know you've got a lot of folks working for this, and I'm willing more to talk with them and try to figure out a way how we could even narrow this more. But I've got some great concerns using our protections that we provide to our municipalities under the Government Tort Liability Act to a non-governmental entity, because this is exactly what this does. And so if we could do that, I would appreciate that, but I certainly want to talk through that to narrow it, hopefully even further if possible. So that's all my comments.
Representative Russell, you recognize, sir.
I would be glad to sit down and do that, and would you be interested in entertaining the idea of passing it through sub, and then we do that before it goes to full?
Representative Garrett? You know, we have, let's see, this is your second calendar. So you have another one. We have another meeting next week. If the sponsor would be willing to roll it we could roll it, right? But if it's a material change, it's frowned upon moving forward, unless it's just end of session. The bill's a great bill, and we've got to figure out a way to get it through because there's no more committee meetings and such. We're on a time crunch. I think we're in a good position to counter it one more time. I mean, unless there's a reason I'm missing.
I'm at the will of the committee, whatever's the most efficient.
Yeah, I think a motion.
I would agree with the chairman.
Yeah, it's fine. I think rolling it a week does it some good, and we can work on it and hopefully move it forward after that.
I make the motion to roll it 1 week.
All right, you make the motion. All right. Any? How about a member on the committee can just echo that? Can we echo that? Right.
I'll make it roll 1 week.
Very good. We got a motion and a second. We're going to roll this bill for 1 week. And like I said, this is only the second time it's been counted. Now, next time it'll be a third calendar. So without objection, members, we're going to roll House Bill 697 as amended to 1 week from today in the Civil Justice Subcommittee. Any objection? Seeing none, roll for a week. Thank you.
Thank you.
For that. Item 7, Representative Potts, House Bill 1023. There are no amendments on this that have been filed that I see. So it looks like you have a motion and a second, sir. So you're good to move forward.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Appreciate the first and second. This kind of little history about the bill. Currently, environmental courts, the max fine they can assess is $50. So I did research about a year and a half ago trying to figure out how we can make this available, that more fines can be assessed in environmental court. So I did some research. We came up, the legal came up with the best thing I thought would be the best, would be let the local bodies decide by 2/3 vote to allow impanelment juries to decide for these habitual offenders and these worst case scenarios, codes violations, dumping, et cetera. So that's kind of what the bill does. Entertain any questions that anybody has.
Members, any questions for Representative Potts? Chairman Curcio, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor, I just want to make sure I understand this because I've read through it a couple times. So what you're proposing is that a county court or a county commission by 2/3 vote could impanel a jury or a court. I want to make sure I understand that.
Representative Potts.
That's correct, for environmental court only.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, sir. But they're impaneling the jury only, or they're impaneling a court itself?
The court. So that allows the judge and the courts to have impaneled, because currently under our state constitution, the max fine you can assess is $50 without having a jury present. And so this is a way to, without changing our constitution, to allow the court to do that.
Chairman Curcio.
Okay, so thank you. That was going to be my next question, which is what problem are we trying to solve here? And so what you're telling me is the largest fine without a jury present is $50. I'm familiar with that. And why are these types of cases not being handled elsewhere? In other words, why is it up to this sessions level court to look at this?
It's a great question. That's kind of why I brought it to the legislature. We have several habitual offenders in Davidson County that just pay the fine and don't either fix the code violation or the illegal dumping. So just keep paying the $50 and just don't even go to court, don't even show up, just pay the fines. And this would give the judge and the court a little more teeth to the bill, because currently it doesn't. Our environmental courts don't do anything in Davidson County.
Okay. Chairman Curcio, any follow-up, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess what I'm struggling with is that a general sessions court and a jury being together in the same spot I've just not seen that. But thank you for bringing the bill. I think I still have some more questions, but.
Okay. Next on the list is Representative Clemens. I thought I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Potts, thank you for this legislation. The environmental courts have a very specific purpose, is that right?
That's correct.
Within a very exclusive, limited jurisdiction.
That's correct.
And in Metro government of Davidson County, they happen to be assigned the general sessions courts, correct?
That's correct.
And currently, if I'm hearing what you're saying, the cases that are come before them, you've got repeat offenders who are just more than happy to pay $50 every time they get caught.
That's correct.
Even though the damage they're causing could exceed that well above $50.
That's right. That's right.
And so without a jury, they can't fine them anything more than $50 under the state constitution.
That's right. The prime example is we had some illegal dumping in South Nashville that really had me thinking about this. The max they could charge is $50. So then the county is forced to clean that up. And so if there's, $8,000 worth of roofing shingles dumped on a property or on the side of a street, the city has to clean up, so there's no way to find that company. There was even a company caught in Antioch doing the same thing, dumping shingles during the storms last year. And this is kind of came from that. So max they could find was $50. So of course they're going to keep doing it if the max is $50.
So they're making a cost-benefit analysis as to what the teeth in the legislation actually are versus what their conduct is going to incentivize them to do. I mean, that's basically what we're trying to address here.
That's correct.
And
Representative Clemens, you recognize.
yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And is this bill, let me make sure I get this right, because I'm not sure. Any county could authorize an environmental court. Is that right, currently?
That's correct.
Representative Potts, you recognize.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So this could apply to any court and to whichever court within their county system they chose to make the environmental court.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Okay, Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Potts, for bringing this bill. And to my colleagues on, on the committee, man, we really need this bill. I'm serious, we have some real problems in Shelby County with illegal dumping, out-of-town landlords, properties becoming blighted that go to environmental court, and environmental court, and I appreciate our judge in environmental court, Judge Dandridge, but they basically receive a slap on the hand, for these egregious and repeated issues that are happening in our county, and so just so I'm clear, under your legislation, by 2/3 vote, the legislative bodies of the county can convene an environmental court. And
That's correct. They would have to enact legislation by 2/3 vote of the local council or commission, right, in that county.
Right, which is a tough hurdle. So they'd have to really be intentional about enacting a court, and then they could convene a jury under that court by 2/3 vote also, correct, under this legislation?
Representative Potts, you recognized.
That's correct, yeah.
So what I'm hearing, and I hope my colleagues on the committee hear this too, is that these legislative bodies have to be really intentional about wanting to do something about this the situation that's a repeated offense that doesn't seem to be getting cured under the regular constraints of an environmental court.
President Potts.
That's correct, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and I just want to impress upon the members of the committee, our sponsor spoke in regards to Davidson County, but it's not just Davidson County. I'm telling you, Shelby County, we have a real issue, and I didn't even know the representative was bringing this bill, but I'm really glad you brought this bill, and I hope we can move it forward. And I don't see where this could be harmful to any county across the state to be able to utilize this tool in their toolbox only if needed. And there are a lot of counties across the state that do actually need this, not just urban counties but rural counties too. And so I hope that we can get this bill out and get it passed. And thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. And as I understand it, there are 3 of these courts in our state. There's one in Knox County, Davidson County, and Shelby County. And as I understand it, these courts interpret municipal ordinances, okay?
That's correct.
So, and as I understand it, we have specific instances here of problems. We have these same problem folks in Shelby County area, I'm guessing, as Representative Parkinson said. So why is this law, affecting, why do you want to affect all these, Knox, Davidson and Shelby? Why don't you just bring a bill that would fine or make it a crime for these bad actors? It seems like that would be the cleaner way to do it, instead of coming in and saying, well, we're going to enact a jury, and we're going to do this, and it's going to affect all 3 courts across the district or across the state. That's just, ruling on municipal law, on the municipalities. Why didn't you just bring a bill to find the bad actors, just a clean bill to find these bad actors? And like you said, it's just a specific group or a specific set of folks that keep on doing this. Why didn't you just craft a bill that would just, direct a larger fine or maybe even a criminal penalty to these folks?
Thank you, Chair. The problem is it's several different. It's landlords. It's construction companies. I'm in the construction business myself, and I kind of find it. I had to pay dumping. It's very expensive, and I see people dumping all the time on the side of the road. But how do you pinpoint a certain offense to a certain thing, right? I mean, there's already illegal dumping in place, but when somebody dumps on somebody's property and they get codes called on them, luckily the person had a camera that they recorded the dumping of the roofing company. And so then they turned the roofing company in, therefore it went to environmental court through that process, right? And so they weren't able to assess a fine. And so it's just tough to pinpoint exactly what like to do a legal dumping fine of $2,000 or whatever, but then you've got people that, landlords that leave tall grass, that don't remember that, they have, maybe 100 violations in 3 months, certain things like that. It's just hard to narrow it down to a specific violation.
Representative Clemens, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sponsor, correct me if I'm wrong, the issue with the chairman's suggestion is that the counties that have environmental courts have assigned them specific jurisdiction over these claims.
That's right, just certain offenses, right?
And the courts that are handling those claims currently cannot assess a fine over $50 because they can't impanel a jury, correct?
That's right.
So all we're doing is empowering a local government to assign the power to that court that has exclusive jurisdiction, the power to impanel a jury, so they can assess fines for the claims that are, and the violations that are already in the law.
And I'm sure y'all are more knowledgeable about this, but doesn't the judge have the discretion to not have a jury or not in that, or would it be automatically a jury for each violation? And would that be up to the judge to decide the?
I think it would depend on what court you're in, whether that court has the authority to impanel a jury or not. I know in general sessions court, in civil sessions court, that the courts are not courts of record, and there's no juries there. We get up to state court, you can impanel a jury, sure, but honestly I don't know enough about this area of the law to speak to it personally. Representative Clemens, you recognize?
Yeah, I think because these specific courts have been assigned their jurisdiction over these claims, they're kind of caught in a catch-22. All these types of claims are going to be assigned to that specific court, but that specific court can't impanel a jury, therefore it can't assess a penalty over $50. So we're caught in this wedge where the law is good and there's penalty and there's prohibitions, but they're going to a specific court that has already been assigned by each locality, 3-4 counties, but they're handcuffed, so to speak, because they can't assess that penalty. So I think what we're simply doing here is empowering local governments to give them the power to do that, to address that limitation within the Constitution. It seems to be pretty straightforward, but maybe I'm missing something. Thank you.
Okay, I have a suggestion. Members, this is the second calendar for this bill. We have a meeting next week. Would the sponsor be willing to roll this for 1 week? It sounds like you're well intended, but the committee is in the position that none of us were able to speak to you beforehand about this, so there's some questions there for us. But it sounds like we may be able to move forward with something, and it doesn't hurt you to roll it for a week. And I hate to even roll it for a week because I want to get through our calendar. But if you've got a good piece of legislation that's well intended and the policy's good, we want to pass it. So would you be willing to roll this for a week so we could talk about it?
I'd be happy to.
Members, any objection to that? All right, without objection, I'll take a motion in a second to roll House Bill 1023 to next week's calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it.
Thank y'all so much for the discussion. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, brings us down to item number 10. Item number 10, House Bill 409. Chairman Lafferty. Second. Got a motion and a second. Sir, and looks like you have an amendment 5917. Is that something you want to move forward with as well?
5917, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. And I know we had a discussion, I believe, on this bill last week. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Yes, no, last week.
It was last week?
Yes.
Okay. And
In
we
the
were working
COVID
with-
fog of
Excuse
committee,
me?
yes.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyways, members, we want to go ahead and get a motion in a second on that amendment. It probably makes some changes to the bill that came from conversations with the Department of Safety. So you got a motion in a second on Amendment 5917. You want to go ahead and tell us what that does?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all probably remember from last week the biggest objections, the biggest complication, maybe not objection, but the biggest complication is the dividing line from where civil and criminal courts diverge and can't communicate with one another. We've taken all that language out, referring to the criminal conviction side of things. That's gone. Had a nice conversation yesterday with Ms. Stroker, and that seemed to alleviate some of their concerns. And I don't know how much time you guys want me to spend on this. I know you've heard it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse if you guys don't need me to. But we have gotten rid of the language that refers to criminal conviction. And that was the greatest hurdle that was laid out last week.
Okay, members, anyone have any questions on Amendment 5917? Representative Garrett, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Lafferty, you had said there's some that alleviate the problem, and I didn't know if you could tell me what's left. From your perspective, what does the Department of Safety still have, if any, objections to your amendment?
Chairman Lafferty?
Their remaining objections, it's a good question. Their remaining questions address moving a start date, moving an effective date, and let's see. Those were the big ones, and then there was something also about the LEOs and their use of the proceeds. It's item number 23 in the bill. That information comes out of the comptroller's office, and there was concern that there may be a delay in them being able to provide that information. But we have taken a knee to the department to try and get them where they are okay with this. And I'm to the point where we need to make this happen. I don't know if I answered your question in full.
Representative Garrett, you recognized?
Oh, no, you did. I was just curious from your perspective, because I'm sure Ms. Stroker on behalf of the Department of Safety will also testify. I just wanted to make sure that, there is some back and forth to make sure we get
Yes,
to somewhere
we have been
where
communicating.
everybody can be on the same page. So, okay, thank you for that.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Thank you.
Members, Representative Parkinson, you recognized?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you put me on the bill, please. Sorry about that.
Very good. Any other questions on the amendment? All right, looks like we're ready to vote to adopt House Amendment 5917, House Bill 409. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. Representative Parkinson, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I will say, thank you, number one, for, trying to create, some goodwill on this legislation between yourself and the department. And, I think this is about transparency and about the public being able to, know what we're doing in state government. And so anytime, we exhibit transparency to the public, I think it's good for the public, and not just good for the public, but good for us also. And then there's some accountability that goes with that, coming from us, from this body, and from the other branches of government. So I want to thank you for that bill. And Mr. Chair, can I get a roll call vote on this, please? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, you do not have the proper amount of hands to have a roll call vote. It takes 3 hands. So I have 2. Motion fails. So we have Liz Stroker on the list to speak. Members, any objection going out of session to hearing from Ms. Stroker? Seeing none, we go out of session.
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for the Department of Safety.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Chairman Lafferty is correct. I think we're almost there. We just have a few small things that we'd like to work out. One is changing the report due date back to March 1st, which is what it currently is. The amendment still has it at February, and it's currently really tough to get it done by March 1st. So we'd like for it to stay at that March 1st due date, especially if we're adding in some other parameters. Also moving the effective date, it's currently July 1, and if we're talking about adding in a bunch of new data that we've got to collect, we have to update our computer system and then update all of our forms and receipts that have to be used for all agencies, and so we're asking to move that to hopefully January 1 of 2022, and then you can start with a full year of all of the same information. Another thing is, as Chairman mentioned, that how the proceeds are spent on local law enforcement agencies. Obviously, we have that information for THP, but it's collected through a comptroller audit annually that comes out at a different time that we are required to post online with the forfeiture report when it's ready. And so if that could maybe stay in that process because it's not done at the same time as this report is due, those are little small things that we still needed to work out and hoping the sponsor will work with us in full committee or as the bill keeps moving.
Members, any questions? Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, those don't seem extremely unreasonable to me to move this bill forward, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure, just I guess a point of order, you know, how much space does the member have to, in regards to possibly us either moving the bill forward and getting that adjusted, those specific items, or you know, rolling it or for a week and getting those Elizabeth's issues adjusted. I mean, do we have any room to do that?
Well, we're out of session right now. We have Ms. Stroker up here for questions or comments. Do you have any of those?
Oh, that was it. I'm sorry.
Once we get back into
Yes,
session, I'll
okay.
be happy. We'll
Thanks.
take that up.
Okay,
Members,
okay.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we've heard about what those suggestions would be. I mean, is it your understanding that you can get there?
Yes, sir, and I think we had a good conversation last night, and there was one other thing I forgot to mention. It does require we provide information of the property owner, whereas right now it's the person the property is seized from, and so we've also been working with him. We may not just have that information if we don't know the property owner, if they don't want to provide that to us, and so maybe adding in if we have it or if available. But I think they're all things that we can work through. They're pretty small changes, and the rest of it is pretty doable for us, so we're comfortable with whatever the committee is comfortable with.
We're good. Chairman Curcio, any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so this reference to the property owner, you may seize something that you know by public record does not belong to the person who's in possession of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
Yeah.
so with those tweaks, though, again, you think the Department of Safety can get this is not a hard stop, hard no. We can never get there. There are ways to make this happen.
Yes, sir. I think with these, like, just small changes of dates and then clarifying property owner, and then maybe looking at the comptroller report versus what information we have, we'd be fine with the bill if those changes were made.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any additional questions for Ms. Stroker before we go back into session? Thank you. All right, without objection, let's go back into session. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized, sir, and that may have answered your question, as a matter of fact.
Well, I think mine was more procedural than anything.
Okay.
Do we have time on the calendar and with the process to be able to get this bill either move forward or with the department's suggestions specifically, or you know, give them another week on it to get the department's suggestions on there, you know? And I think, honestly, look, and I'm not trying to ambush the sponsor or anything, but you know, I think his intent with the bill is in the right place for most of us, and the department, you know, their suggestions completely understandable. I think we just need to. This is a good bill, and so whatever we need to do to make it work, I just think we need to make it work. And I don't know what that posture is at this point.
Members, any questions?
That was a
or-
question to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And I don't think I disagree with that. And I see that this is his first calendar, and I'm hating myself for making this recommendation, but we may want to roll this for a week because we do have the time instead of moving it forward, because it's frowned upon for us to move a bill forward when we do have the time to fix it between subcommittee to subcommittee. So I think what I'm hearing is the Department of Safety says, hey, look, we've got something we can work with here. We need to tweak some language. That's going to take an amendment. Our last calendar is next week. This is the first time this has been calendared, according to my chart here. So there was nothing to preclude you from getting an amendment filed by 10 a.m. on Monday for this committee to have that amendment heard with that cleanup language that Ms. Stroker spoke of while we were out of session. That's a suggestion, and I'm at the will of the committee.
Motion to,
Okay, got a motion, second.
Question, please.
Go ahead.
I missed a week and a half, and I believe this bill was on the calendars. Where am I in the rolling process? I understand you have a, okay.
Yeah, I have you down as first calendar, and, well, if it's worst case scenario, it's second, excuse me. I have been corrected. This is the second time it's been calendared.
So I'm good.
This
then.
will not go to that special calendar. This will be calendared 1 week from today.
Just want to make sure.
Just be sure to get your amendment filed with that language by 10 a.m. on Monday,
Yes, sir.
okay? And I have a motion and a second to roll your bill. So, members, ready to vote? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and we're rolling House Bill 409 as amended for 1 week for today.
Thank you,
okay?
Chair. Thank you, committee.
Mr. Chair, point of order real quick.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, commend you, and this is not any bootlicking or anything, but you've been very consistent with how you're moving these bills or rolling these bills and not showing any favoritism to anyone, and I appreciate that. Just wanted to say that.
Well, we get towards the end of session here, and this happens, and if we have an opportunity to work on a bill between subcommittees, we will. Sometimes we end up on a last calendar, and we've got a good piece of legislation that we'll do something a little different with, but thank you for that.
And thank you. All chairs are not the same. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Okay, members, that brings us down to item 13, House Bill 1255 by Chairman Sexton. He's around here somewhere, and there's no amendments on this bill. It's been filed. Members, do I have a motion and a second? Representative Sexton, I don't have a motion or a second, sir. So your bill fails for lack of a motion. Brings to item 15, members. That's House Bill 676 by Representative Garrett. Have a motion? You got a second? And you have an amendment, sir, 5816.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to move forward with that amendment 5816.
Very good. And you've got a motion and I believe a second now. So, sir, if you go ahead and just tell us what that does.
Sure, the amendment makes the bill, it's regarding the Homestead Exemption. This is a bill that I think this is my third year to discuss the home bill, the Homestead Exemption bill. What it does is the Homestead Exemption has been stagnant since probably 1978. It's been $5,000. We are increasing under this legislation for one person that $5,000 to $35,000, and if you're a couple, of course, you get the increase to $52,500. We are simply adding or increasing that amount to, one, keep up with inflation, and then also recognize the average value of the home, therefore the average value of someone that may have equity in their home. So with that explanation, the Tennessee Bankers Association has brought me this legislation in conjunction with working with the home builders, and the home builders do support this legislation. And so we are finally going to be able, I believe, to increase that homestead exemption to the $35,000 respectively. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Very good. Members, I know this bill is something we've worked on coming out of last year. We spent a lot of time on it. A lot of stakeholders have had an opportunity to have their input in it. So I don't have any questions or comments, members. And we're on the amendment. Okay, very good. Question has been called. We're voting to adopt House Amendment 5816 to House Bill 676. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Ayes have it. We're back on the bill as amended. Question on the bill. Question's been called on the bill. All those in favor of sending House Bill 676 to Civil Justice Full Committee as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on, and I believe.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
I believe that wraps up our calendar. And I did want to say this, that if a roll call vote is going to be requested, it has to be, whether it's by the sponsor or a member of this committee, that request has to be made before a vote's taken on the bill. That includes a vote on an amendment of a bill. So once a committee has taken action with regards to a vote, it is too late for a member or the sponsor of the bill to request a roll call vote. So I wanted to clear that up. Representative Parkinson, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that clarity because I was under the understanding from past experience that you can request a roll call vote specifically for an amendment, also separately of that of a full vote. And I apologize for the misunderstanding.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. I believe the calendar's finished. I've enjoyed it. Motion? Motion to adjourn. Very good. Thank you all.